next presenter is William Thiele. He is farming in a high rainfall area in Pennsylvania. The Thieles switched to no-till cover crops in 2015, which resulted in greatly reduced ponding and runoff during wet periods. A sixth-generation farmer, William farms along with his parents and his brother. The Thieles started experimenting with cover crops first in 2012, then in 2015, and then started to do more and more. Today, they plant green as much as possible and no-till 100% of their acreage. William has been on the Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance Board of Directors since 2021 and regularly shares insights into their practices with others. Please welcome William Thiele.
Thanks, everybody. I had to inform Julia how to properly pronounce my last name because it's often mispronounced as Thiele or Thiel, but it's Thiele. Good German name for those of you who are wondering. So anyway, like Julia said, I am a dairy farmer from unfortunately, the now famous Butler, Pennsylvania. I'm sure you've all heard of that for an unfortunate reason. That happened about 8 miles away from my farm, so FYI. And unfortunately, I knew of the guy that was shot and killed there. So my farm, my brother and I are the sixth generation. My brother and I work with both my parents. My brother and I are twins, actually. So not saying he could be my stand-in, but you guys wouldn't know anyway. But nonetheless, here I am. So I was kind of surprised I was invited here because I believe there's only 3 of us here from Pennsylvania. I have the Hershey's back there that are also from Pennsylvania. And how this started was that Rick Bieber was at a field day with the No-Till Alliance. I happened to be at my farm back in 2021. And Rick called me up a couple months ago and said, I don't know if you remember me, but I did a field day at your farm. And I thought, I remember you, but I don't know how you remembered me. But nonetheless, that's how that started. So we get the lighting perfect. All right. I know I'm before lunch. I don't want anybody to fall asleep or anything. So I want to start everybody off with this question. Because I was thinking, what am I going to say here today that's going to get through to everybody? And I thought, how about ask this question? And I thought, what is the most dangerous phrase in farming? So it's kind of the same phrase as same question as what is the most dangerous phrase in business. Kind of the same thing because we are all in a business. So I thought that applies to farming. So what is the most dangerous phrase in farming? And I thought, I believe this is the most dangerous phrase in farming. We've always done it this way, right? Well, yeah, of course. We've always done it this way. It's always going to be the same year after year after year. No, it's not. So I want you to kind of have that background whenever I'm talking here. So I have this photo of my farm. This is the oldest aerial photo that my farm has, I believe. It was taken in 1957, I believe. This is still the original homestead. I want to point out down here, we used to have chickens. That's what these are down here. But we kind of had these big plots that were out and about like that. And this would have been when my granddad and his brother were running the farm at the time. And now I'm going to compare it to an aerial photo that I took. This is probably about a month ago. The contour strips that we're doing now, the waterways, which I'll get into a little later. But how different it looks. Not only the photo quality is different, but the way our farming practices are a lot different now. So, like I said earlier, we are dairy. We farm about 300 acres, milk about 40 cows, total heads about 80. I know that's not big, especially out here. Even in my area, we're not big by any stretch of the imagination. But nonetheless, we've found a home doing no-till cover cropping and all that good stuff. So one of the first things that we did, when I say we, I mostly mean my parents because my brother and I were basically little kids at the time whenever they really started implementing a lot of this stuff. And one thing that they did was that we went into farmland preservation. We were the first ones in in my county to do it back in 1997. And at the time, my brother and I would have been either 4 or 5 years old, depending on when they signed the agreement. But the state of Pennsylvania bought our development rights, and our farm cannot be developed for forever. And at the time, my parents took a lot of flack for that, even from some of my own family members, because they said, "Hey, your kids, you're going to force them to farm." That's what everybody was saying. And obviously, it turned out well because both my brother and I are active on the farm. But just wanted to point that out. So that started the conservation practices. Keeping the land they farm, to me, is a conservation practice. So another thing we first started on was sod waterways. I have some pictures of sod waterways in action. I like to use a drone. I'm known as a drone guy in Pennsylvania, so I like to use a lot of drone footage. And so I have waterways that are in action. I know those photos look really horrendous. I know I kind of cringe when I look at them. That's because of the way the sun angle is at the time. But I wanted to show the sod waterways in action. That older aerial photo I showed you, there was no waterways, no conservation practices, nothing. Now on our land, we have 7 waterways that we've used with NRCS contracts and everything. We're actually next year looking to implement even more on rented ground, because the landowners that we farm, they see the practices and the good that we're doing. So go right into the nuts and bolts here. This is not an official mix. This is just what we conjured up. Thus call it the Thiele Crazy Mix, or as we say, the Thieles are Crazy Mix. So like I said, with us being dairy, we grow corn, soybeans, oats, hay, and we grow our own rye for seed. And so this mix is typically what we do for our summer mix after we harvest the oats and the rye. And we roughly put in this mix. Now you can see I have a question mark with the crimson clover because we plan ahead. And if next year we plan putting corn in there, we put the clover in. If next year it's going to be into soybeans, we take the clover out. And so that's what we've been doing with that. We've experimented with this mix a little bit. I think one year we tried sun hemp that for whatever reason didn't work out. We've tried turnips. We've tried a lot of different things. So I'm not married to any of these, but nonetheless, it's something we've been trying. One thing that we're going to try and do this year, which we already have and it's already growing, is ryegrass. I know ryegrass is known for being very difficult to kill. We'll find out, but nonetheless, it's with a bunch of other things, and so we're going to try to see what that's like with planting green, which I'll show you a little later, and how all that goes with this system that we have here. So I have more drone footage, imagine that, of us planting green, which we've already talked a little bit about planting green. So how we got into this was that our NRCS Ag Tech agent in our county, he always knew that we Thieles are guinea pigs. When I say guinea pigs, we'll try anything just because we like to experiment, we like to learn. And he said to my dad, he said, why don't you try this planting green thing? We attended a couple meetings kind of like this, and we said, oh, sure, why not? What's the big deal? Why don't we just try it? And so we tried it, and for good or for worse, we live along a heavily traveled state highway. So you can see the good and the bad of living along a state highway. And most of our farm, you drive by and you can see most of it. And so the very first time we tried planting green, we tried it sort of close to the road, back our driveway. We tried it back in 2017 for the very first time. And this same NRCS agent that got us to do it, he was going to work one day. He saw the rye flatten down, and he said that he laid rubber down on the road and turned around and came back to see what we were doing because he was so shocked at what we were doing. So he came back and he was taking pictures. He was just in his glory. And he said, man, what are you guys doing here? And so we showed him, and he said, oh, you guys are doing great, wonderful things with this. And so that's probably one of the reasons why I'm standing here, is because he laid rubber on the road and came back to see what we were doing. But the earlier one I showed, I was planting corn. We've experimented a little different ways with doing that. This one is planting with soybeans. We got the soybean splitters in the front of the planter. We've had some trial and error with this. If you notice on the closing wheels end, we've had spiked closing wheels and drag chains. That is a nightmare planting green. Trust me, it is. It turns into round bales and it turns into a big gouging kind of thing that goes on. Yeah, you can almost kind of see it down here. It turns into a mess. So we went with cast iron, and I have a couple of slides later that show what we're trying now. But we took the drag chains off. We did a little more experiment with that. Another thing we did with planting green corn versus soybeans was that with corn, with 30-inch rows, we have rolled behind it. Now, we used to be all conventional tillage, so we have chisel plow and the disc and the harrow and all that good stuff. And so whenever we started doing this, we had our old colimulcher with the teeth and everything. So we were wondering, we need to roll this. How do we roll it? So we just got our old colimulcher, lifted the teeth up, and just rolled it down behind it. And I'll show you later that we've kind of graduated from that as well. And with corn, we felt the need to do it with corn because corn needs that sunlight down whenever it's popping out of the ground. With soybeans, however, you can see with we're doing 15-inch rows with the splitters, and we've found that we don't always need to roll, at least in my observation. One year we actually rolled half the field for soybeans and we didn't roll the other half, and it came up exactly the same way. So we thought, what's the point of doing that? So we've not rolled for soybeans whenever we plant, especially with planting green. But there's other factors with that as well. But that was one observation that we made from experiments that we had on our own farm. So here's more evidence of us planting green here. Right here, we're planting into rye, clover, and rapeseed, I believe that was in this mix. And you can see how relatively short the rye is in that one. The video I showed earlier, it was relatively tall. This was from last spring, so spring of 2023. And we had a very dry spring in my area, and we thought we need to get ahead of this because the cover is going to take too much water out of the soil. And so we decided to plant it a little bit earlier than what we're used to, so thus that's why the rye looks so short. We still rolled it. Some of it like to spring back up. Some of you that have experience with that, the young rye is kind of hard to flatten, and so we did that. Now I talked about the closing wheels that we had earlier. This one on the left, these are cast iron with spikes. They do pretty well with planting green. The only exception is it likes to wrap a little bit in here. This one on the right, that's all rubber. That one does not wrap at all for whatever reason. But we've tried both. They both work equally as well, just other than getting out the needle nose pliers and ripping that apart. Sometimes isn't fun, but you learn. So here's another video of walking right behind it. You'll see the clover and the rapeseed that's behind that. So you can see a little bit of that in there. Now, another thing that you'll notice here is that this is the same field back in when we're harvesting, because I was harvesting and I thought I want to showcase that rye that is still doing that mulch, that weed suppression that's down in there. And I thought that was great to see that it was still doing that late in the season like that. And from what I've observed, we talked about observations earlier today, and an observation I made is that the only weeds that I see that are getting through that during the growing season, I've seen some dandelions, and that's about it. And so I tell a lot of people that I prefer dandelions over mare's tail and pigweed and all that fun stuff. So that was my observation there. So another thing with no-till coolers, maybe you've seen that in that cell phone video I took there, but since I've been involved with the Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance and being with guys like Jim Hershey, every time I talk to guys, they say, oh, you need to take those no-till coolers just completely off. And I thought, that sounds kind of crazy. I might try that. So I told my dad, I said, you know, guys at no-till lines, they took their colders completely off. Why don't we try that? My dad, oh, that's not going to work. Why would you do something crazy like that? I said, oh, come on, let's just take some off the planter and not and see what a side-by-side comparison is. So this is the one with the colder on it. You can see how much disturbance is in that. And from what I've heard from a lot of guys, like I'm sure a lot of you are aware of Jim Horman, I believe he said that you're getting a lot of sidewall compaction in that. I thought, okay, that makes sense. We got the big, fat, wavy colders, as I call them. And so we're with the 4-row planter, so we took 2 off, left 2 on. So that's the one with the no-till colder on it. Oops. That's the one without. You can see there's very little soil disturbance. This little sliver here, I believe that's the fertilizer opener right there, just in case you're wondering. But we saw that, and my dad saw that, and he's like, oh, wow, it looks like it's didn't disturb much soil. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. We don't want to disturb any soil, or as little as possible. And he said, oh, let's rip the other 2 off and just keep going. Okay, that was easy. I didn't expect him to turn over that quick, but then ever since we've taken them off and never really thought much of it. So here's our planter underneath here. You can see that the only thing that's opening it is the opener here, and with this photo here, this is a row cleaners. We later found out this whole mechanism ended up getting a lot of dirt inside of it, so we actually ended up taking this entire thing off. And so I think I've convinced my dad of it, because he's made comments like, the next time we get a planter, I don't know if we need row cleaners or colders or anything like that on it. And I'm like, yes, that's cheaper. So I think I convinced him to at least think of a different way to do that. But that was one thing that we tried. And one thing that it did do was that this caused us to change our closing wheels like I had earlier. And we changed to the cast iron ones with the spikes because it thought it closed better with just that little slit in the ground. Because whenever you till up that soil with the colder, it's easier to kind of push back together. Whereas just that little slit's a little harder, especially if it's wet. Because like I said, we were a little bit wetter than what a lot of you guys are compared to out here. So this is roughly what our herbicide program is. I put this in because usually everybody always asks, but I'll show later a case study I did of how much we're saving by lowering the rate. But this is the rate that we use now. This is actually 25%, roughly 25% less herbicide than what we used to do because of our soil health practices. And one observation I want to make here is that we use high oleic or Pioneer Plenish. Since we're dairy, we've been using that for the past 3 years or so. Currently, you can only spray it with glyphosate. So at times we have a little bit of a mare's tail problem in beans because we can't spray them currently, but I believe that's going to change pretty soon. But that's nothing. The mare's tail is not a problem enough that keeps you awake at night, but it's still there. But nonetheless, that's what we've been using for the herbicide program. So more things that we've done on my farm. We work a lot with Penn State, and a couple of years ago they had a cover crop test plot. This would have been planted after oats, and our Penn State agronomy agent, he said, let's have a cover crop test plot. Let's put in several different areas of different covers and see how they turn out from early fall all the way till next spring. So he had me take aerial photos every week up until winter and then the next spring of what the covers eventually look like whenever they start growing. You can kind of see some of the differences in what's being grown here. If you see a little bit of a strip there, that's because my brother planted it and he missed it. So, he's not here to defend himself. So, but nonetheless, you can see what's growing here. You can see the white with the buckwheat flowering. You'll eventually see some yellow from the rapeseed that's growing, and you'll see what wintered over and what did not. And but then you can see how frost, because the buckwheat was frozen off, and you can see how it progresses. And our agronomist, he monitored each one to see, the aggregate stability, what the penetrometer was reading, all that stuff. Each time he came out and looked at it, and he was giving us readings. All the forage oats are doing this, and the buckwheat's doing this, and he did a lot of observation with that. This one's the next spring. You can see the one on the far right had a lot of winter kill. There was a lot of, I think there was forage oats and a lot of other winter killed kind of covers that were on this one. The one beside it was obviously a lot of rapeseed in there that wintered over, and but that was an observation that we found was, all these different things, how just in a relatively short amount of time it made the soils in the same field kind of act so differently in a way, just because of what was planted there, and that helped us to see, and it helped our agronomists to see what was going on in there and why it was acting so different from the crops that are growing literally right beside each other. So this one, if Rick Bieber is still here, this is the field day that Rick was at, and this is back in 2021, and we had a cover crop plot with King's Agri Seeds, and we planted all these different plots here. And if my memory serves me right, in this plot there was at least 50 to 60 different species in it, if you add them all together. And so King's Agri wanted to demonstrate the plot. The covers did really well. We had a good bit of rain that year, and the covers were so big and huge. I think you could have hit an elephant in it. It was so big, especially towards later in the season. But all these good things in there, all different kinds of buckwheats and all different kinds of rye and ryegrasses and all kinds of crazy things were growing in there. Stuff I've never heard of was in there. And I believe Rick Bieber, if he remembers, we had our King's Agri Seeds salesman there, David Hunsberger, who's on our board now, on the No-Till Alliance board. He had a plot there. Can't remember exactly which one, but Rick, I remember, looked in it and he said there's some compaction going on from rainfall that caused King's Agri Seeds to switch up that whole different mix. And every single field day that I've seen David do, he always says, "Hey, William, do you remember that Rick Bieber guy that was at your field day that told me that this mix had some compaction in it?" "Yeah." And he's said that every year since. So that made a good impression on him, I think. But I thought this was very valuable to see all those different crops that were growing in there and how they interact with each other. And the pollinators in there, I mean, you almost get a headache from the buzzing that was going on inside. But this field day was, in particular, pretty successful because it got on the front page of my local county newspaper, which I never thought it would. And it showed this plot, and there was people walking through it, and everybody probably thought, "Oh, geez, what are those crazy Thieles up to again?" With all these bees and stuff going on in there. It didn't only showcase to farmers in my area what we're doing, but it showcased to the general consumer via the newspaper of what we're doing. Because like I said earlier, the good and bad of living along a major state highway, that was the good part, one of the good parts. There's many other good parts, but that was one to showcase our farm, because now people ask, "Hey, what are you guys growing there? Why are you guys growing sunflowers? What's that white flowered thing? What's that yellow flowered thing?" So everybody, it is intriguing to them, and it makes them say, "Why are you growing that? I didn't think we could grow sunflowers in Western Pennsylvania." Yeah, and so that is so invaluable to us to showcase that and how to do with that. So switching gears a little bit here. This is a picture of me on the front of the American Agriculturalist talking about a cover crop twofer. So I'm going to get into what the cover crop twofer is. So we said earlier about farming, or the way we farm is sometimes by necessity. So this was by necessity whenever we first started. So back in the year 2020, everybody's favorite year, we were very dry and we had very little hay. And to the point that we thought we needed to buy some or do something different. So we had a cover crop that was probably at least knee high, and it was that oats mix, that Thiele crazy mix roughly, that we had. And this was, you can tell by the trees, it was about mid to late October, and we asked our nutritionist, we said, there's a cover crop out there. What do you think about mowing it and wrapping it up? Because we're low on hay, we need to do something. And he said, try it. Why not? You guys try anything. Why don't you try it? See what happens. So that's what we did. We mowed it, we raked it up, and we baled it into nice little bales because the skid loader couldn't handle anything bigger than that. So then we wrapped it. Previously, we had not wrapped. We don't wrap much hay. We make dry hay, and then we, for forage, we put into our silos. You probably saw earlier. So we did this. Of course, it was in October, and this year we did two separate rounds of it. We did some at the end of October and some at the beginning of November because the weather window was there. So we wrapped it, and I had our nutritionist do a forage sample of this. And for you dairy guys, you probably want to know what the IVDMD is. That's very important. And the IVDMD is 81, and so there's the starch very top is off the charts practically, and all these other things are looking great. And our nutritionist, he looked at this and he said, "What are you guys going to feed this for?" Because usually we feed our dry hay to our heifers, our calves. And we said, we're going to feed to our breeding age heifers and calves. And he said, you should be feeding this to your milk cows. This stuff's like corn silage. You should be feeding it to them. Okay. And we didn't at the time because we thought, we don't want to mess up the ration or anything. Other things in here, calories, 716. That's very high. And so after that, we started feeding it to our breeding age heifers. And any of you that have worked with a forage like this, it has an aroma of, I'd call it sauerkraut, or trying to think of how else it smells, but it smells excellent. And I remember the first bale we got out, I believe it was in December of that year, and I'm in the skid loader and I'm driving over to our heifer building, and the heifers, they're all practically busting the gate down because they could smell this thing from a mile away practically. And we almost had to beat them out of the way to get the bale in the feeder. And I think my brother was cutting the net wrap. They were practically beating him up because he couldn't even cut the net wrap. They were so excited to eat all this. And the forage, there was, that volunteer oats, there was whole radishes, probably that big, all in that forage. And they were just eating it like it was carrots. They were just, and they annihilated that bale the first time. Like it was like kids eating candy. And we thought, how many bales are we going to feed of this? And we thought, we'd probably go through, 2 bales a day, or not 2 bales, a bale every other day. No, we need more than 1 bale a day because they were just annihilating it so fast. And those bales were relatively small compared to what we're used to feeding them. And they just kept constantly eating it all the time. They couldn't get enough of it. And to the point where we were feeding them grain and they weren't eating very much of it. They just kept eating the candy basically. And so we thought, this stuff works. I mean there was a lot of other stuff in there. We thought, they won't eat sunflowers or buckwheat that's they're not going to eat that stuff. Well, the forage oats and all the radishes and everything that were in there, they just couldn't help themselves. They just kept eating it over and over again. And so then the following year, we didn't need the hay, but we did it again. So we thought, why not do it again? It worked well. And so then we ended up actually selling some more of our dry hay, and so we can make some of this. Weather window was there, so we made it. And then we started feeding it to our milk cows, and our nutritionist was, of course, all for that. And so we started doing that, and our milk production, which our milk production, roughly, we get about between 90 and 100 pounds. So we started feeding that to them, and it was pretty comparable to that for what they were eating beforehand. So now, just because of something that we had to do by necessity, we now do it just because, even if we don't need to do it, we just do it because it's there, and we decided to do it. Now, this year we're probably not going to do it because we have too much hay at the moment, which, knock on wood, I don't want to say that, but nonetheless, that was an experiment that we tried that we needed to do, and it came out great. And and another observation, I know some would probably want to ask, but when you mow that cover in October, November, it's probably not going to grow back, right? Well, this was what it looked like the spring after. So it all came back. I shouldn't say it all came back, but it sure looked like it did. So you can see what's in here. There's rye, there's rapeseed. And I know people have asked if we got hairpinning the year after. I didn't see very much, if any. And so that's where the name cover crop twofer come in. One, it was a feed, and two, it was the cover that lived, and we planted green through it the next spring. And so we thought, that's more than two, that's 3, 4. That's how many different things that it was able to do that we did for that. So other things that we've done, I did a Cornell soil health assessment back in 2022, Cornell out of Ithaca, New York, and we did this soil health benchmark study, and showcased all those different things at the bottom there. And it gives you a score. 100 is the highest score, and we got an 85, which is very high. But the important things, we were looking at organic matter, because we do soil health testing with Penn State, and we do that every 3 years for our fields. And our organic matter is about 4.5. Being that this was in 2022, I hope right now it's just a tick higher. But all these other things that showcase that we are on the right track, that we're doing the right thing here, and our soil is telling us that we're doing the right thing, and so all these things have added up to us lowering our fertilizer inputs. It has us doing like top dressing a little differently than what we normally did. We do not fertilize our soybeans whenever we plant them. We just strictly plant them, and that's it, because of our soil practices, I believe, which is something that this would showcase a lot of. So I know whenever I was asked to talk here, I believe this case study was in the online format of the program here. So this is a case study I did with American Farmland Trust back last year, and they wanted farmers from Pennsylvania to talk about their soil health journey, and so I gladly decided to do that. And so what it did, it showcases all the increase in income, decrease in income. It goes through how much it costs. They have a calculator of how much it costs to run equipment, how much your soil is worth, all that good stuff that showcases in here. So this actually is that major highway that I mentioned earlier, but this is the rye that we grow for seed, and we conveniently placed this field right beside the road so that whenever we could grow that nice cover crop, everybody asks what it is when they drive by. So not that that's part of our soil health plan, but it worked out. So we originally started experimenting with cover crops in 2012, as it shows there, because of an NRCS payment that we got for cover crop seed. And of course, why not? So what AFT did was that they asked what our rotation is. This is roughly what our rotation is mostly. And so they ask, what is your motivation? Motivation, obviously, reduce erosion. You could probably see by a couple of photos I had about how hilly we are. And I know that my dad always said that whenever he was younger that he would see erosion so bad, not just at my farm, but neighbors' farms, that they would get gullies so deep that you could practically hide in. They would get so big and deep because they would farm up the hillside and down and plow up the hillside and down, which hurts my ears. So that was the main motivation, and save time and be more efficient with field operations. So this is a chart I want you guys to see here. So first thing it asks, are you seeing increase in income, meaning are your yields going up? So I was conservative, and I asked my dad, I said, do you think we're seeing increases, decrease, all that? He said, I'm going to say it's about the same. Okay, so that's what I went with, although I'm willing to bet we probably are seeing better. I wanted to be conservative and didn't want to lie about it, so I said, let's just leave it at 0. And when I told AFT that, they were kind of surprised. They said, oh, usually they always see an increase. Like, I told them, I said, I probably am. I just can't put pencil to paper to say that we are or not. So I just left it at that. So decrease in cost here. So in machinery cost savings, from reduced passes on I believe they have us as 295 acres is what they based this off of. So, well, actually this one has 239. It took out the hay ground that we have. But by reduced tillage passes or just passes in the field, we're saving $54 an acre. And so every year that adds up to nearly $13,000 a year that we're saving just by not doing those passes. That's strictly what that's saying, by not doing any passes, unnecessary passes. Another thing I told them that we observed reduced herbicide inputs by 25%. I believe I said that a little earlier. And we stopped using fungicide-treated soybean meats. And so our per acre savings was $24 an acre on roughly 170 acres of corn and soybeans. That saves us a little over $4,000 a year by not doing that. And so we've also reduced P and K inputs on oats by 25%. And the value of decreased erosion due to no-till, $5 an acre. I'll get into that a little later. But what all this added up to is our annual total increased income was nearly $19,000 a year. Now, if you were to put that on your farm, let's say you farm 1,000 acres and you save per acre, all that added up, that adds up to a lot when you think about it. So this definitely showed that we are saving money with this. And you stop back and you think, you know, if I was to do all these tillage passes, I'd have to make that much back in yield by, you know, to pay for the tillage that I'm doing. And so this really told a good story for me. So another thing that this showed, decreases in net income. I had it at 0. And the increase in cost, of course, was the seed. We grow our own rye seed, so that helped a little bit there. And they had cover crop and learning activities. I mean, I don't know if I put a lot of value into that, so I don't know if I want to count it as a decrease in income, because I like coming to things like this and learning from other folks and everything. But that's what that showed there. So annual change in net income per acre, $31 an acre. And so that's a story that tells there. So this is another photo of our strips. They're roughly 90-foot strips is what we do. I know a lot of guys talk about soybeans and how they can be detrimental to soil health, which they can be. That's probably one of the main reasons why we have 90-foot strips, because soybeans is in our rotation. And if we did not have soybeans in our rotation, we could probably take out the contours. But we have soybeans that we grow for our cow feed anyway, so it's part of our rotation, and that's what we decide to do. So other things that shows here, observed reduced ponding and runoff. I have seen that a lot, especially in the past few years. That heavily traveled highway that I mentioned, it's been repaved several times, and sometimes the way they repave it, the water likes to run in our driveway and just run right through everything, and which is unfortunate. Especially every time they repave it, they do it a little different, and the water gets diverted to different places. But I've seen a lot less ponding and a lot less runoff, or if none practically, with our practices that we're doing. Other highlights since then, I talked about a different way with our rolling. We got this 3-point mounted I&J crimper roller. We do not use the calded mulcher anymore. This one's a lot more smaller. You know how big and cumbersome one of those tools can be. So we got one of those. So I'm gonna guess if I was to redo the soil health case study with AFT, I would put in this, and they would probably reduce it even more. Other highlights that showed that I want to point out is that soil erosion that I talked about that had $5 an acre that we're saving on soil. NRCS uses the Russell II calculation on that and says that we're saving $5 an acre, which on our acreage per year, we're saving 2.1 tons of soil per year. And when I see $5 an acre a year savings, to me, I don't know if I want to put a value on that, because that's what our farm's based on, is our soil, and I think it's worth way more than $5 an acre. I think so that I looked at that and I thought, well, I think it needs to be worth more than $5 an acre. But it showed that in the study that we're saving that much soil on my farm, which is relatively small compared to a lot, and we're saving 2.1 tons of soil a year, because I'm in a pretty big watershed where I'm at. It's a high priority one. Our water ends up going into the Allegheny River and down the Mississippi eventually, and so there's a good bit of money that's thrown into my watershed. We're not like the Chesapeake Bay. That's a whole other ballgame. But we are a high priority watershed, so we get a lot of practices about cover crops and stuff thrown our way, which is always good. Another thing that it points out, USDA has a Comet Planner tool that they refer to, and this talks about CO2 and carbon sequestration. And it says that our soil health practices reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 154 metric tons, which is the equivalent of taking 34 cars off the road a year. So I like to show that how much our soil health practices are helping the environment. That's another thing I tell non-farmers when they ask, why are you doing all this crazy stuff? I tell them this is one of the reasons why we're taking carbon out of the air and putting it in the soil where it belongs. And so that's something I like to showcase to non-farmers, to show why we do that. This is not my pair of underwear. This is my brother's. My brother's, yes. I stole it from him, yes. Because anyway. But our agronomist, our Penn State agronomist, he said, I want to do the Soil Your Undies campaign, and I've heard of it, and I'm like, what do you mean? So I'm going to get a pair of, what are these, Fruit of the Loom, I think, and I'm going to go bury it in the corn out there, and we had buried there, I think it was for 60 days, and after that, if you have good microbial soil health in there, and it's going to eat away at it, and it's going to look like that. Wow. Okay, so that shows the activity that's going on, and he said all that should be left is the waistband in there, and all the rest of that there. Okay, and when they showed me that, I'm like, okay, that's great. I saw that. That's something we've been doing in Pennsylvania a lot, is soiling our undies, and so.
Give them back to your brother.
I don't know if he's going to wear these or not. He'll tell me to wear them instead. But that's another soil health indicator. And I've told some of my friends that don't do soil health. They see me do something weird like this, and they're like, "You are insane. Why are you burying your underwear?" And I'm just like, "Well, you got to showcase this," and then they make jokes about not wearing underwear, and yeah, so it's quite comical in a way, but nonetheless, it shows the activity that's going on in the soil. Another indicator I've seen, as you see what's going on here, this is corn plants, and they're being, from what I've taken, what's happening here is that the earthworms are pulling the corn leaves into the soil, and so they're finding food and pulling it in. I see this every single year when we're chopping corn, and I go and I try to find this, and I'm like, oh, there it is, right? Oh, there it is again, and I saw it. We were chopping last week, and I saw this exact same thing, and that's another indicator, so I don't have to steal my brother's underwear and show him what's going on. But that was another observation that we made, showing good soil health. And like from our planting green with the rye that's laying down, I've seen where the earthworms would pull the leaves down, and you would see almost like an ant mound is what it looked like, and it looked like they were almost making their kingdom and pulling it down in, and it was quite interesting to see that activity going on in there. So usually when I do presentation like this, I like to give this quote, is that you take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. And so that's something that I like to usually end with, is that whenever we first started, we didn't see the whole staircase. Probably nobody saw the whole staircase. We might not still see the end of that staircase, but you're taking those first 2, 3, 4 steps to eventually get to the end of that staircase. And so the soil health practices that we're doing is just 1 or 2 steps. And so we want to keep going to eventually see the end of that. And so, because we all know as farmers, as landowners, you have to have faith that seed's going to grow. You have to have faith you're going to have enough water and not too much, enough sun and not too much. You have to have faith that that's going to work. And with no-till and cover crops, sometimes that is not for the faint of heart. And we've said to ourselves, hey, we just need to keep going along. I believe Ronald Reagan said, stay the course, and so that's what we're doing. So that's what we've been striving for, to get incrementally better, to get better 1% better every day, and so that's what we strive for. And fun fact, this is round bale art that my mom does, and she likes to paint things, so she painted the Pennsylvania No-Till Alliance logo on top of 2 round bales. So that's something she likes to do. Actually, I told her to do it to make it look good, but anyway, but for the field day that we had back in 2021. I'll be around later today, so you guys have anything else, you can talk to me later. So thank you.